The job I should have known something was off from the very first call. It came on a stormy Thursday afternoon while I was curled up on the couch, half listening to the rain beat against the window. I'd recently moved to Lafayette, Louisiana for school and was picking up babysitting jobs to make ends meet. The number that called me wasn't one I recognized, but I answered anyway. Money was tight. The voice on the other end was female, smooth and slow like syrup. She introduced herself as Mrs. Thibodeau. Her accent was thick Cajun, and there was something about the way she spoke that made me sit up straighter. "I hear you're good with children," she said. I told her I had experience, mostly toddlers and grade school kids, and she seemed pleased. She didn't ask many questions. Instead, she gave me an address and asked if I could come by that evening for an overnight job. Her daughter, Evangeline, was 7 years old, and they needed someone to stay with her while she and her husband attended a family emergency out of town. Normally, I would have said no to such short notice, but the rate she offered was nearly double what I usually charged. That should have been my first warning sign. People don't pay that kind of money unless there's a catch. I packed an overnight bag, tossed it into my car, and headed toward the address she gave me. It was located on the outskirts of town, near the bayou. The roads became narrow and overgrown, and the GPS began to glitch, rerouting me endlessly. I nearly turned back twice, but I reminded myself of the paycheck and pressed on. Eventually, I found the house. It was a sprawling, old plantation-style home, hidden behind a rusted black gate and overgrown vines. The house itself looked like it had been plucked out of a Civil War documentary. 2 stories, with a wraparound porch and tall windows that reflected nothing. The trees around it were thick and looming, their moss-covered limbs hanging like old curtains. Even in daylight, the place felt shrouded in shadows. I parked near the front steps and climbed out, feeling the wetness in the air cling to my skin. I hadn't even knocked when the front door creaked open. Mrs. Thibodeau stood there, tall and graceful, wearing a dark green dress that looked vintage. Her face was pale, her cheekbones high, and her hair pinned back in an elegant twist. She looked like someone from a different time. "You must be Eliza," she said, giving me a slow smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded, suddenly very aware of how quiet it was. No birds, no bugs, just the faint rustle of leaves and the distant croak of a frog. Mrs. Thibodeau stepped aside to let me in. The interior of the house was just as eerie as the outside, furnished in antique pieces dimly lit with high ceilings and old oil paintings hanging from the walls. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. As we walked through the parlor, I noticed how her heels made no sound on the hardwood floor. She led me to the kitchen, where a neatly typed sheet of paper waited on the counter. "These are the rules," she said, placing a pale hand on the page. "Please follow them exactly as written. They're very important." I picked up the sheet and scanned it, thinking it was probably a list of bedtimes and food preferences. But the more I read, the more my skin began to prickle. 1. Evangeline must be fed dinner at exactly 7 p.m., not a minute before or after. She will not ask for food, but she must eat. 2. Do not let Evangeline watch TV or use any electronics. She knows why. 3. At 8:30 p.m., Evangeline must be in her room. Do not enter after the door closes. 4. If Evangeline knocks on your door during the night, do not answer. It is not her. 5. The curtains in the living room must remain drawn shut. Do not open them under any circumstance. 6. You may hear whispering from the attic between midnight and 3 a.m. Do not investigate. 7. Do not leave the house after sunset. I looked up at Mrs. Thibodeau, expecting some kind of smirk or reassurance that it was all a joke, but she only looked at me with that same unreadable expression. "Is this for real?" I asked, half laughing. She gave a slight nod. "We've had incidents. These rules keep things calm. Follow them and you'll be just fine." Her husband appeared then, a tall, thin man with sunken eyes and a limp. He offered me a nod and said barely 2 words. Together, they left in a sleek black car that didn't match the house or the vibe at all. I stood on the porch, watching their taillights disappear into the trees, holding that sheet of rules in one hand and wondering if I should just leave. But curiosity got the better of me. That and the money. Inside, I met Evangeline. She was a pale, quiet girl with large green eyes and black curls that framed her face. She wore a white cotton dress and didn't speak unless spoken to. She wasn't rude, just distant, like someone watching the world through a thick pane of glass. I asked her if she wanted to draw or play a game, but she only shook her head. We spent most of the early evening in silence. I made her a simple dinner, mac and cheese and apple slices, and placed it in front of her at exactly 7 p.m. as instructed. She didn't touch it at first, just stared at the clock until the minute hand clicked into place. Then she began to eat. At 8:30 sharp, I walked her upstairs to her room. It was a large bedroom with a canopy bed, stuffed animals arranged carefully on a rocking chair, and thick velvet curtains drawn tight. She walked in without a word, sat on the bed and looked at me. "You have to leave now," she said softly. I hesitated. "Do you want me to read you a story or—" "No," she said, her voice more firm this time. "Close the door." So I did. Once the latch clicked into place, I stood there for a moment, unsure of myself. The hall behind me stretched long and dark, and the lights seemed dimmer than they were earlier. I glanced back at her door. It looked so normal, like any little girl's room. But the silence behind it was too complete. I headed back downstairs and tried to distract myself with TV, but something about the flickering screen made me uneasy. I remembered Rule 2 and turned it off. Instead, I sat on the couch with a book I'd brought, the rule sheet still on the side table next to me. As the night deepened, the house seemed to breathe. I know that sounds weird, but it really felt like the walls had a pulse. I kept hearing faint creaks from the ceiling, slow and rhythmic, like footsteps pacing in the attic. The clock ticked steadily toward midnight. At exactly 12:07 a.m., the whispers started. They weren't loud, but they were persistent, like voices behind a wall. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, angry, sad. I pressed a pillow to my ears, trying to block them out, and reminded myself of Rule 6, do not investigate, and I didn't. But around 2:15 a.m., just as I was beginning to doze off, I heard the knock. 3 soft taps on the door to the guest room where I was supposed to sleep. I froze. Came a voice, high-pitched, childlike. It sounded just like Evangeline. "Please, I'm scared." My heart dropped into my stomach. The rule came back to me immediately. Do not answer. It is not her. I sat there, paralyzed, as the knocking came again. "Eliza?" The voice sounded strained now, like someone imitating a child. Not quite right. A little too breathy, too slow. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Eventually, the knocking stopped. When morning finally came, I found Evangeline in the kitchen, already dressed and eating cereal. She looked up at me with her eerie green eyes and said, "You followed the rules." I nodded, still shaken. She gave a small smile. "Good." By morning, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept more than an hour. My nerves were stretched tight, and every creak of the house had me flinching. But there Evangeline was, calm, collected, spooning cereal into her mouth like nothing had happened. She watched me with those wide green eyes as I sat down across from her. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, more to fill the silence than anything else. She didn't answer right away, just tilted her head and said, "You didn't answer the door. That's good. Most people do." My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. "What happens if I had answered?" I asked. She shook her head gently. "They go away." "Who's they?" "The ones in the attic," she said simply. Then she resumed eating, like we were talking about cartoons or school lunches. I didn't ask any more. I wasn't sure I wanted the answers. At 9:30 sharp, the Thibodeaux returned. Mrs. Thibodeaux glided through the front door like she'd never left, thanked me for my time, and pressed a thick white envelope into my hand. She asked no questions about the night, didn't offer any updates about the emergency, and didn't even ask how Evangeline behaved. As I stepped out into the daylight, I felt like I'd surfaced from underwater. I should have left it at that. I should have taken the money, blocked the number, and never driven down that road again. But a week later, Mrs. Thibodeaux called again. This time, she asked for 2 nights. "I understand if you're uncomfortable," she said, her voice as smooth as ever. "But you handled yourself well. We would feel much safer if it were you." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say no, but then she mentioned triple the original rate. And just like that, I agreed. The second visit started out the same. A drive through suffocating woods, the house waiting like a crouched animal. Mrs. Thibodeaux handed me an updated rules sheet, almost identical to the first, but with a few additions. 8. Do not enter the basement, even if Evangeline asks you to. 9. If you hear 3 knocks from inside the fireplace after 1 a.m., place a piece of raw meat on the hearth and walk away. Do not look inside. That last one chilled me. You're serious about this? I asked her, holding the paper with a shaking hand. As serious as you want to live, dear, she replied with a smile. Then they left. This time, Evangeline was already waiting in the parlor when I arrived. She was coloring with crayons on a scrap of brown paper. The picture looked innocent enough. Trees, a house, and 2 stick figures holding hands. But behind the house there was a black shape. Tall, long arms, no face. Who's that? I asked, pointing to it. She didn't even look up. That's the Watcher. I laughed nervously. Is that like a game? No, he lives in the woods. I didn't know what to say to that, so I asked if she wanted to help make dinner. She shook her head and went upstairs instead. I followed the rules to the letter, fed her at exactly 7 p.m., tucked her into bed at 8:30 p.m., didn't open the door after it shut behind her. The night stretched long again. Around midnight, the whispers returned. This time they were louder, more urgent. The words still weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable. Desperate pleading, like someone trapped behind a wall. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, sipping cold coffee and trying to ignore the growing feeling that the house didn't want me there. At 1:13 a.m., I heard it. 3 knocks from inside the fireplace. I froze. It wasn't possible. I hadn't even noticed the fireplace before. It was hidden behind a tall, arched cabinet in the living room. But now I could hear it clearly. Knock, knock, knock. From inside the brick, my eyes darted to the counter, where a tray of meat Mrs. Thibodeau had left sat wrapped in plastic. I grabbed a piece, something raw and marbled with fat, and walked slowly toward the hearth. The cabinet was open now. I swear to you, I hadn't touched it. The fireplace was pitch black, the inside coated in soot. The air was freezing in front of it. My hand shook as I laid the raw meat on the bricks and backed away. I didn't look inside. I didn't want to see what might be watching me from the dark. I turned and walked away, just like the rules said. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The house seemed more alive than ever. I kept hearing soft scraping sounds behind the walls, like something was crawling inside them, and just before dawn there was another knock at my door. Eliza, came the voice. This time I didn't freeze. I stood up, heart pounding, and walked over to the door. I didn't open it, but I pressed my ear to the wood. Eliza, the voice said again, I'm scared. I whispered back, You're not her. The voice went quiet. Then it laughed. Not a child's laugh, something older, dry and splintered like dead wood snapping. I jumped back and stayed in the far corner of the room until sunrise. When I finally opened the door in daylight, there was nothing on the other side. But the wallpaper near the baseboards was shredded, as if something with claws had been dragging them across the walls all night. The Thibodeaus returned that morning, again without explanation, and this time Mrs. Thibodeau didn't wait for me to leave. You've seen them now, she said softly. I stared at her, unable to speak. She reached out and brushed my arm with long, cool fingers. This place doesn't like outsiders, but it likes you. You followed the rules. I left that morning with more money than I'd ever made in one weekend. But I couldn't stop thinking about the scratches in the wall, about the Watcher, about the voice that laughed like broken branches. I tried not to answer her next call. I really did. But when it came 4 days later, I picked up. The third time I agreed to return, I told myself it would be the last. I don't know what made me say yes. Maybe it was the envelope of cash that still sat untouched on my kitchen counter. Maybe it was the way the air in my apartment still felt thick with something I couldn't explain, like the Thibodeau house had left some of itself behind. Or maybe it was the fact that I kept hearing 3 knocks on my wall at night when I was nowhere near a fireplace. This time, Mrs. Thibodeau didn't even try to persuade me. She simply said, You know the rules. You've seen what happens when they're followed. Imagine what happens when they're broken. Then she gave me the dates. 3 nights, not 2. The drive felt colder than before. The trees along the dirt road leaned in closer. The Spanish moss hung heavier, like it was trying to whisper secrets as I passed beneath it. When the house finally appeared between the trees, something was different. The windows were all dark. The porch lights were off. For a moment, I thought no one was home, but then the front door creaked open by itself. I stepped inside. The smell of lavender was gone, replaced by something musty and sharp, like rotting wood and burnt hair. I found Mrs. Thibodeau in the sitting room, standing in front of the fireplace, staring into the cold, black hearth. She didn't greet me. "They've grown restless," she said without turning around. I didn't ask who. I didn't want to know. Instead, I glanced at the kitchen counter. The rule sheet was there as always. This time it was handwritten. There were 10 rules now. 10. If Evangeline begins to hum, cover your ears. Do not let the melody finish. The last one made my stomach twist. The thought of that little girl, pale and quiet, humming anything sent a shiver down my spine. I asked Mrs. Thibodeau if everything was all right. She looked at me for a long moment, then placed something cold and heavy in my palm. It was a key. "Keep it with you," she said, "in case the basement door opens." My throat went dry. I thought I wasn't supposed to go into the basement. "You're not," she replied, "but sometimes it tries to let you in." And just like that, she left again. The house was mine. Evangeline was already in her room, silent as always. She barely acknowledged me when I brought up her dinner at 7 p.m. She didn't say a word when I tucked her in at 8:30 and closed the door behind her. But this time I saw something new. Just before I left her room, she looked at me and whispered, "Don't let the key talk to you." It took everything in me not to ask her what that meant. I went downstairs, heart pounding. The air felt heavy. Each breath felt like it carried dust, like I was inhaling the bones of the house itself. I sat in the armchair with the rule sheet in one hand, the cold metal key in the other. Around 11 p.m., I heard a thump. Not from above, from below. It came again, louder this time. Something beneath the floorboards. Something moving. I walked carefully to the basement door. It was near the laundry room, tucked away at the far end of a narrow hall. The door was old, painted white, with a rusted brass knob and no visible lock. Except tonight it had a keyhole, and the key in my hand pulsed. Warm now, almost eager. I backed away quickly, remembering Rule 8. Do not enter the basement, even if Evangeline asks you to. I jammed the key into my jacket pocket and fled to the living room. I sat on the couch, every muscle tense, waiting for something else to move, to creak, to whisper. And at 12:33 a.m., right on time, I heard the first knock from inside the fireplace. I grabbed the raw meat from the tray on the counter and placed it on the hearth without a glance. But just as I turned to leave, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Eliza?" I spun around. Evangeline was standing in the hallway, or at least, it looked like her. But something wasn't right. She was barefoot, her white nightgown soaked to the hem. Her hair clung to her face as if she'd just emerged from water, though the floor beneath her was dry. "I need help," she said. I stared at her. My mouth was dry. "You're supposed to be in bed." Her head tilted, slow and unnatural. "I came from the basement." "No," I whispered. She stepped forward 1 foot at a time. Her bare feet made no sound. "You have the key. Let me back in." I backed away, heart hammering. "You're not Evangeline." And then she smiled. The skin on her face stretched, cracking at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes turned impossibly black. She took another step forward, and from upstairs a door slammed. The fake Evangeline vanished. Just blinked out. 1 second there, the next, nothing. I ran upstairs. The real Evangeline's door was wide open. She was sitting on her bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with fear. "It's trying to trick you," she whispered. "It always does on the third night." I sat with her until she calmed. She didn't ask to come downstairs. She didn't ask for water. She just asked me to stay in the hallway by her door. I agreed. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the long hallway ahead of me, every shadow stretching and twisting with each passing second. At 2:57 a.m., I heard humming, soft at first, a child's lullaby, off key. It came from inside her room. I covered my ears immediately. It grew louder, sharper. The melody had no words, but it pulled at my thoughts, made my skin crawl. I pressed my palms tighter against my ears and squeezed my eyes shut. After what felt like forever, it stopped. I opened my eyes. Her door was still shut, but when I turned my head, I saw it. The basement door at the end of the hallway, open, just an inch. The key in my pocket burned against my thigh. I didn't go to it. I didn't look. I stayed frozen until sunlight bled through the hallway curtains. When the Thibodeaux returned, I didn't wait for payment. I handed the key back to Mrs. Thibodeau without a word. She looked at me, almost sad. She sang, didn't she? I nodded. She never used to, but the house likes you. I'm done, I said. Her smile faded. You say that now. And as I walked down the porch steps, I realized I could still hear the melody. Faint, humming from somewhere far behind me, like the house was singing me home. It's been 2 weeks since the last time I stepped foot inside the Thibodeau house. 2 weeks since I heard the humming, since I watched a little girl vanish from my hallway, since I stood inches from the basement door and felt it breathe. I told myself I was done. I ignored Mrs. Thibodeau's calls. I blocked the number. I even considered leaving Louisiana altogether. But the house, it didn't let me go. At night, I still hear the knocks. Not from a fireplace this time, but from my closet, from my bathroom mirror, from beneath my bed. Sometimes I wake up with dirt on my feet, though I don't remember leaving the bed. I find dark, greasy handprints on my window, even though I live on the 3rd floor. Last Thursday, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no postage stamp. Inside was a note, scrawled in elegant cursive. She remembers you. I burned the paper in my sink. The same day my bank account was credited with a large deposit, 5 times what I was ever paid before. There was no sender. They were calling me back. I wish I could say I resisted. But when the second letter arrived, folded neatly inside one of Evangeline's crayon drawings, I knew I had no choice. The picture showed me, standing beside her, but this time there was something else behind us. A dark figure with many arms, no face, and dozens of white eyes. The words underneath read, "We're waiting." So I returned. It was dusk when I arrived. The trees were so thick with fog that I almost didn't see the house until I was on top of it. The porch lights were off. No car in the driveway, yet the front door was already ajar, as though it knew I was coming. I stepped inside. The air was colder than before, almost damp. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet like they were sighing. The whole house smelled faintly of iron and smoke. The rule sheet was on the kitchen counter. 12 rules now. 11. Do not use any mirrors after sunset. Cover them if you can. 12. If you see a girl who looks like Evangeline but doesn't blink, do not speak to her. My fingers trembled as I read that. From upstairs, I heard the faint creak of a door. Then soft, bare footsteps padding across the wood. Evangeline appeared at the top of the stairs, pale as ever, wearing the same white nightgown, though this one was stained at the hem with something brown. She didn't say hello. She only stared down at me, wide-eyed. "Are you real?" I whispered. She blinked once, slow. Then she nodded. I wanted to ask her about the girl in the mirror, about the figure in the drawing, but she turned and walked back into her room without a word. The door clicked shut behind her. I followed the rules like before. Dinner at 7 p.m. Her door shut at 8:30 p.m. Curtains drawn, fireplace meat offered. But this time, something felt different. The house wasn't just breathing now. It was watching. I felt it every time I turned my back. The air shifted subtly behind me, like invisible hands brushing past. The walls groaned like they were hiding something inside them. And at 10:45 p.m., I caught my first glimpse of her. I'd gone into the guest bathroom to wash my face. I knew the mirror rule, but I thought maybe just this once it wouldn't matter. It wasn't even dark yet, but when I looked up from the sink, I didn't see myself. I saw her, standing behind me. She looked exactly like Evangeline, same pale face, same dark curls, but her eyes were empty, glossy like glass, and she didn't blink. She just smiled. I spun around. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. I slammed the mirror cabinet shut and threw a towel over it. Rule 11. Later, as I sat in the parlor trying to keep my hands from shaking, I noticed something strange. The oil painting above the fireplace, it had changed. I swear to you, it was different. It used to be a portrait of some ancestor, a man in a military uniform, but now it showed a girl, Evangeline, standing in a garden of withered flowers, her face turned toward the viewer, mouth slightly open, as if mid-scream. I tried to look away, but the longer I stared, the more I swore she moved. First, her hand lifted slightly, then her mouth opened wider, then the eyes turned, ever so subtly, to look straight at me. I tore the painting off the wall and threw it face down on the floor. I didn't sleep, not even a little. At 2:17 a.m., I heard a knock at my door. I didn't move. Then another knock, this time softer. Closer, Eliza, a voice whispered. I see you. It wasn't Evangeline's voice, it was mine. I bit down on my lip until it bled and didn't answer. The whisper faded into silence, and all I could hear was my heart thudding in my ears. At sunrise, I stumbled into the kitchen, desperate for light. I opened the refrigerator for something, anything to distract me. That's when I saw the note, taped inside the fridge door, scrawled in crayon. The mirror girl came from the basement. Later that morning, I found Evangeline sitting in the sunroom, curled up on the window bench, watching the fog swirl outside. I sat next to her. She didn't look at me. I see her now, she whispered. Who? The other me. She watches from the mirrors, but sometimes she gets out. I didn't want to ask what that meant, but she continued anyway. She wants to take my place. I looked down at her little hands, folded tightly in her lap. Can she? Evangeline nodded slowly. If I sing to her. My blood went cold. Have you sung? Not yet, she said, but the house wants me to. I touched her shoulder. Don't listen to it. Don't sing. Her voice was flat, empty. I'm trying. That evening when the Thibodeaux returned, I didn't wait. I told them everything. The girl in the mirror, the painting, the humming note in the fridge. Mrs. Thibodeaux listened in silence. When I finished, she only said one thing. The house is preparing her. For what? She was born here. The house wants to keep her, but it needs a trade. My skin prickled. A trade? Mrs. Thibodeaux's eyes met mine. Calm, cold, something of equal value. The drive home after that fifth night was unlike any other. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the mirror girl sitting in my back seat. My hands trembled so badly I could barely keep them on the wheel. Even with the windows rolled up, I swore I could hear humming, soft and sour, like a music box winding itself backwards. Mrs. Thibodeaux's words echoed in my mind over and over. The house wants to keep her, but it needs a trade. Something of equal value. That phrase haunted me. I didn't go back to class. I didn't see friends. I barely ate. The mirror in my apartment stayed covered with a blanket, and I kept all the lights on. Still, strange things happened. On the second night, my phone screen cracked without falling. On the third, I found muddy footprints leading from my bathroom to the kitchen. On the fourth, I woke up to a child's drawing on my pillow. It was of me, standing in front of the Thibodeaux house. But this time, I wasn't alone. The mirror girl stood beside me, holding my hand, and both of us were smiling. When the final call came, I didn't answer it, but a voicemail played anyway. It wasn't Mrs. Thibodeaux's voice. It was Evangeline's. Quiet. Afraid. I can't stop her. She's coming tonight. If you don't come, I think she'll take someone else. Click. I should have called the police. I should have done anything else but what I did. But I got in my car, and I drove back. It was just after sunset when I reached the edge of the property. The trees looked black against the bruised sky, and fog curled thick around the base of the gate. I parked and walked the long gravel path to the house. The front door was open. Again, inside, the lights flickered dimly, as if struggling to stay lit. The rule sheet was gone. Evangeline wasn't in the kitchen or her bedroom. I found her in the basement hallway, standing barefoot in front of the door. The same door I was never supposed to open. It's unlocked, she whispered. She didn't turn to look at me, just stared at the door, hands at her sides. You said she's coming tonight, I told her gently. How do we stop her? Evangeline's lips quivered. You don't stop her, you just don't let her choose. A cold dread unfurled in my chest. Choose what? She finally looked at me. Who stays? The light overhead flickered once, twice, and then died. For a moment we were shrouded in darkness. Then, from the other side of the basement door, knock, knock, knock. Evangeline flinched. I grabbed her arm. We're not going down there, I said. But even as I said it, the doorknob turned, slowly, silently, and the door opened. I saw only black beyond it. Not the kind of dark you get when lights are off, but something thicker, deeper, alive. And from within that darkness, she stepped out. The mirror girl, identical to Evangeline in every way, same pale skin, same dress, same curls. But she didn't blink. Her smile was too wide, and her shadow stretched the wrong way. She stood across from us in the hallway and tilted her head. Eliza, she said in my voice. I pulled Evangeline behind me. You're not her. She smiled. Neither are you. That's when I realized the truth. She wasn't here for Evangeline anymore. She was here for me. All this time, I thought the rules were about protecting her. But the house had never wanted the child. It already had her. It wanted someone who didn't belong, someone who kept coming back, someone who followed the rules perfectly. Me. She's almost ready, the mirror girl said. But you just right, her smile widened until her mouth split at the corners. Her skin stretched like melted wax and her feet lifted from the floor. She floated forward, arms outstretched. I turned and ran with Evangeline clinging to my hand. We sprinted through the hallway, past the parlor, toward the front door, but it slammed shut before we could reach it. The windows wouldn't break. The air turned syrupy and thick. And then the humming started. The girl behind us. A slow, eerie tune with no words. Just a melody that coiled in my ears, crawling into my thoughts. My legs buckled, my vision blurred. I could see her reflection in the window glass now, gliding, twitching, mouth still open. I covered my ears. Evangeline screamed, "The mirror! Don't look at the mirror!" I tried to turn away, but the house shifted around us. The hallway bent, the walls stretched. The door we came from was gone. We were back in the parlor. The painting had returned to the wall, and in it, the mirror girl was smiling. I didn't know what to do. My brain was crumbling under the pressure of it all, when suddenly, Evangeline yanked the fireplace poker from the stand and pointed at the hearth. "We give it something else," she said. "We trade something else." "What do you mean?" I shouted. "She wants a body. The house wants a soul. She doesn't care which." Before I could stop her, Evangeline stabbed the poker into the old oil painting. The canvas tore straight through, and from behind the painting, a panel opened, a hidden compartment. Inside it was a mirror, no frame, just a tall, full-length mirror nailed to the wall. And behind the glass, the mirror girl stood, watching. She moved only when we moved. I covered Evangeline's eyes. But as I looked into the glass, I saw something that stopped me cold. It wasn't just her reflection, it was mine too. And behind me, something taller, the watcher. No face, dozens of eyes. He reached a hand toward me. I screamed and stumbled back, but Evangeline pulled the sheet from the couch and threw it over the mirror. The humming stopped. The air lightened, and the mirror girl was gone. The door creaked open behind us, the front door. For the first time, real daylight poured into the house. I didn't wait. I grabbed Evangeline's hand and we ran. We didn't stop running until we reached the end of the gravel path. The trees thinned. The light returned. We stood panting, shaken, unsure of what had just happened. Evangeline looked up at me. Her voice was hoarse. "She won't stay gone forever." "I know," I said. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. But when I woke in the morning, there was a new drawing taped to my apartment door. A girl in a white dress looking into a mirror, but this time, the reflection wasn't her. It was me. And I wasn't blinking. I tried everything to forget the Thibodeau house, deleted the voicemail, burned the drawings, threw out the clothes I wore that night. I even called a priest, not to bless my apartment, but just to hear a voice that didn't come from behind a wall or out of a mirror. None of it worked. The reflection in my mirror stopped blinking again 2 nights ago. I covered all the glass in my apartment, even my phone screen. But I still see her, when the lights flicker, when my eyes catch a warped shadow in the corner. She's always there, smiling with my face, waiting for me to forget which one of us is real. I didn't answer the next call. But I got a letter again. This time, it wasn't a drawing. It was a list, and it was typed. A new rule sheet, 13 in total now. I didn't read it at first. I shoved it under the bed like a cursed object, but it kept resurfacing. Every morning, it was back on my kitchen counter. This morning, I gave in and read it. Rule 13 wasn't like the others. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't even a command. It was a truth. 13. Once chosen, you are never truly free. The house remembers you, and soon you will return home. I tried not to cry. That same afternoon, I got another envelope. No stamp, no handwriting. Inside there was a photo, not a drawing, a real photograph of me standing in front of the Thibodeau house, taken from behind as if someone was watching me. Only, I haven't been back since that night. But in the photo, my reflection in the window beside the door is different. The girl looking back has wide black eyes, and she's smiling. At sunset, I packed a bag. I told myself I wasn't going back to give in. I was going back to finish it. To end whatever had begun the night I first stepped through that door. I reached the house just before midnight. It stood in complete darkness. The porch light was off. Every window was black. The gate hung open like a yawning mouth. This time no one greeted me. Not Evangeline, not Mrs. Thibodeau, not the mirror girl, just silence. I walked inside, heart thundering. The furniture was covered in white sheets. Dust coated everything like snow. A sharp, sour scent filled the air, rotting wood and stagnant time. The fireplace was cold. The paintings were gone. The rule sheet wasn't on the counter. Something had changed. I walked through the halls, calling Evangeline's name. No answer. I went upstairs. Her room was empty, the bed stripped. Her stuffed rabbit sat alone on the floor, covered in dust. A single crayon lay snapped in half on the windowsill. That's when I heard it. Not footsteps, not whispers, a song. Not a hum this time, but a lullaby. Sung in a child's voice, soft, high, melancholy. It came from the basement. I knew I shouldn't follow it. I knew what waited down there. But I also knew this was the end. I descended the creaking stairs, flashlight shaking in my hand. The song grew louder, and there she was, sitting on the cold stone floor at the bottom of the basement steps, Evangeline. But not the Evangeline I remembered. This one had no shadow. Her eyes were too wide. Her mouth didn't move as the song continued. She stood slowly. I thought you'd come sooner, she said in that same soft voice. I'm not here for you, I said. Yes, you are, she replied. I stepped back, but the door above slammed shut. You broke a rule, she whispered. My stomach twisted. What? The last rule, she said. You came back. Suddenly, everything went dark. My flashlight flickered out. The air turned freezing. And then a new voice spoke. Not Evangeline's. Not mine. Something older, lower, from the dark behind her. You were always the trade. I ran. Back up the steps toward the door. I slammed into it with my shoulder. It didn't budge. Behind me, the humming returned. Dozens of voices, a chorus of echoing tunes and half-remembered lullabies. I turned and saw the walls of the basement moving, stretching. Faces formed from the stone, mouths open in silent screams. Some I recognized, other babysitters, other trades. The mirror girl stood at the base of the stairs, arms open. You followed all the rules, she said, except the one written into the walls. What rule? I shouted. The house never lets go. The basement shifted, folding inward. I lost my footing and fell. And then, silence. When I woke, I was lying on the floor of the parlor. Morning light was spilling through the torn curtains. Everything looked normal again, except it wasn't. The furniture was uncovered. The painting was back on the wall of me. Only now I was inside the garden, standing beside Evangeline, and I was smiling. The mirror on the far wall was no longer covered. I stood and walked toward it, breath shaky, skin clammy. My reflection stared back, same hair, same clothes, same face. But I didn't blink. I waited, still didn't blink. I moved my right hand. My reflection moved her left. She smiled and whispered, "Welcome home." I never left the house. The version of me that walks around out there, if she's still out there, isn't real. She's a shell, a trade. I'm still here, trapped behind the glass, watching, waiting, because someday someone else will find the house. Maybe it'll be a new babysitter. Maybe it'll be you. You'll see the listing. You'll ignore the warnings. You'll follow the rules. But the house is always hungry. And when the mirror shows your face and you forget to blink, I'll be the one standing behind you, smiling.